What's up YouTube, Capital G here, showing off an excellent duel of Witch Artifact Eidolons, and I really haven't talked about this deck much on my channel. This is a deck that has been making some serious waves in the OCG. It was kind of made to be a hard counter to Zodiac Beast and decks like ABC, decks that really rely on the extra deck heavily. You could even kind of throw Metaphors in that mix, although I'm not sure that this would be super effective against like the Lawn Mowing Infernoid deck because they don't really rely on the extra deck as much as like Zodiac Beast. You guys know that if you happen to use things like Artifact Scythe or Dimensional Barrier against like ABC or Zodiac, you can potentially shut down their turn, especially a deck like Zodiac Beast where, you know, all they really do is just rely on that one Ixie mechanic. Zodiac Beast doesn't run any tuners, so they're not going to be busting out any synchro plays, and they don't have any methods of like fusion summoning or anything like that. So this deck is kind of similar to Hat in a sense. It's three archetypes combined into one deck, and they all kind of work off of each other, especially because of the Eidolons. The fact that Eidolons can pretty much use every attribute to kind of their fullest potential. So if you have like cards in your graveyard, you can obviously banish those. You can summon useful monsters. If you have dead cards on your field or dead cards in your hand, you can use those with the summoning magic, which is just awesome. And I don't know, I feel like this deck it's much better than the sum of its parts, and I'll probably make a couple of videos about this, but I wanted to show this deck for people who are just unfamiliar with it, or maybe you see it on paper and you're just like, how the hell does this win? Now obviously this isn't the strongest build of ABC. Everybody knows by now the ABC with the Galaxy Soldier is not the strongest build. Just run rank 4. Although Cyber Dragon Infinity is a super nice card, it's not really that good if your Cyber Dragon Infinity play gets stopped. So obviously he opens with Ice Bell. You guys know by now that Ice Bell is a turn 1 Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon that cannot be destroyed by card effects, which is one of the best opening plays in the game considering it only costs you 1 card. He then uses Alistar, he uses summoning magic, and he uses his graveyard to make Raideen. Now, if you just assess his field, even though it wasn't a field that, you know, ultimately led to him having more than 5 cards, although he will be able to get his Alistar back, and his field spell doesn't really do that much more than, you know, like being that instant +1, I guess. You just look at his field and you think of how strong of a board this really is. And this isn't a board where he has to like super overextend. He has a Crystal Wing that cannot be destroyed by things like Regeki or Kaiju Interrupted Slumber or whatever. So this is already a very strong play because, you know, basically every single turn negate a monster effect. But then he has Raideen because you're thinking, how are people going to counter Crystal Wing that is, you know, impenetrable or indestructible by card effects? You think of things like Utopia the Lightning. That's where Raideen kicks in. Your opponent makes that Utopia the Lightning. You instantly just book a moon it. And then if that wasn't enough, he obviously has that backed up with an evac device and an Artifact Sanctum. And what I like about this is he has a lot of cards that are defensive cards, but also can be offensive cards. Both of these monsters obviously apply. But then a card like Artifact Sanctum, it's a defensive card because you can get things like Morale Attack and you can blow a card up on the field, or you can go for an Artifact Scythe play and just lock your opponent out of the extra deck. But then at the same time, it gives you a monster, so it becomes an offensive card. So he's going for Galaxy Soldier, and I think he's looking to possibly go ABC plus Cyber Dragon Infinity here, but obviously Artifact Scythe is shutting all of that down. And you know, ABC players, if they're not able to go into their extra deck, just like look at the board that he has. It's basically just a jumbled mess. You know, he's not able to get CDI. He has a bunch of gadgets. Obviously, if he attacks in the gold gadget, Crystal Wing can just negate it, and he still didn't even use his Book of Moon effect. So I'm not sure that he was even close to getting the CDI anyways. Not to mention he had Cyber Dragon. I mean, he still had Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon and Ghost Ogre too. So he's just going to get his board systematically destroyed. And what I like about this deck is it's really not going to be that far before we can play Witch Eidolon Artifacts, because you have to think Fusion Enforcers comes out in February, so that's not too far. You see, he makes the ABC Buster Dragon, but just doesn't do anything against Raideen. He has no hand. Even if he tried to activate the monster effect, obviously Merkaba is just a walking, pretty much kind of like a Solemn, where he just would have been able to blow up the ABC Buster Dragon. Obviously, it can't tag out during your own turn, but like, look how this duel wasn't even close. And this is really the power of this deck. Now, the Wind Witches can kind of be a hindrance if you draw if you open with like Ice Bell, or if you open with the wrong Bell monster and you don't have the turn 1 Crystal Wing. But then at the same time, you can obviously use them to make things like Raideen. So it's like they're not completely dead. There's also possibilities of going into like other synchro plays using things like Alistar and whatnot. So let me know what you guys think. I guess the bigger question that I'm going to ask in this video is, how strong of a deck do you guys believe that Wind Witch Artifact Eidolons is? I think it's going to be a very strong deck. Like, I'm not sure if it will be as strong as Zodiacs, because I think that some of the matchups against like Mermail and other decks that don't completely rely on their extra deck might not be that strong. Like, again, a deck like Infernoids, they don't really rely on their extra deck at all. So that's a deck that could kind of destroy this because your artifacts aren't getting that much value. But in general, I think this is a extremely strong pick. I don't think it'll be a cheap deck, because I do think a lot of these cards in Fusion of Forces will be like ultras and, you know, secrets and shit like that. So unfortunately, I don't think it'll be the cheapest deck. But anyways, I just wanted to show you guys this deck in action for people who don't understand how the Wind Witch deck actually works. It's basically a bunch of strong lockdown monsters, and then just taking away your opponent's ability to use the extra deck with things like Artifact Scythe, with things like Dimensional Barrier. I mean, you basically have 6 copies of those cards if you have 3 Sanctums plus 3 D-Barriers, trying to make it so that they never go into the extra deck. I will have another discussion on this deck and, you know, show you guys the ins and outs entirely, but not today. Thank you guys for watching. As always, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and subscribe if you have not already.